آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. As we said, inshallah, today will be the first part of the series on the Fard Ayn, or the things which are obligatory upon every Muslim regarding their worship. And the scholars, they start with the act of purification, how to purify yourself for prayer. Before we start that, we should remind ourselves of the importance of knowledge and the importance of ikhlas and sincerity in seeking knowledge right before we get started. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for them, He will grant them understanding of the religion. So if you're sitting in a masjid learning, this is a sign that Allah wanted good for you. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever Allah wants good for them, He will grant them understanding in the religion. And learning about our religion is something that will save our deen, it will save our worship from being incorrect, and it will carry on this knowledge to the future generations, to our children and the children after them, because we taught them and we educated them properly. And I have met people, and maybe this might occur in our daily lives, I have met people in their middle ages that said, I just learned in that class that I was making wudu wrong my whole life. They were making wudu like the wrong order, out of order. And subhanAllah, only later on in life, at the age of like 45 or 50, did they realize. So we should keep learning about the religion and not just say, oh, I know all this stuff and I learned it when I was young. We should keep trying to learn. And Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that there is nothing like seeking knowledge for the one who is sincere. Like they do it for the sake of Allah, not for showing off or any other reason. There's nothing like seeking knowledge for the one who is sincere, meaning that it's better than any other extra act of worship. What is better right now, for example, this class or any other class? If we said I could attend this class for half an hour, or I could go in the back of the masjid and pray Qiyamul Layl for half an hour, which one do you think would be better? A lot of people might say prayer, right? In general, there might be some situations where it's different, but in general, no, learning about your religion, sitting in the class for half an hour is better than Qiyamul Layl, or praying at night, or fasting an extra day, or going to extra Hajj or something like that. All of that would not be as virtuous as learning about the religion. And again, there might be some situations where the ibadah might be greater, the sunnah action might be greater. But that's a general rule, is that learning about our religion is from the greatest of the sunnah actions that we can do. Better than prayer and extra fasting, and extra umrah and hajj and things like this. So we don't want to get too long of an introduction on the importance of knowledge. We'll get started right away. We said that the first thing the first thing that the scholars talked about when they talked about prayer is how to purify yourself. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that nobody's prayer is accepted without purification. Nobody's prayer is accepted without wudu. So to pray properly, the condition is that we know how to make wudu. And then before talking about how to make wudu properly, the scholars, they talk about something else. Then does anyone know what that is? What would you talk about before talking about wudu? Why don't we just get right into wudu? What's that? Your clothes? There's something else too, relating to purification. The niyyah, the intention? Not yet, no. There's something before that. It's something maybe you don't expect, which is water. They talk about the different kinds of water. Why? Because if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to go make wudu, or go make ghusl, so I can pray properly. And then there's water here. And then you say, is this water pure? Is this water, am I allowed to make wudu from it or not? So the scholars, they put this chapter first, which is a lot of things to do with water, and then a lot of related things also. So what's the basis of water? The basis of water, that all the water on earth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, it is a category of water called tahur. Tahur water means that it purifies you, and you can use it for two things, which are the important things we need to know. For raf' al-hadath, which is lifting the impurity, the spiritual impurity, and zawal al-najas or al-khabath, which is to wash away a najasa. So if we, for example, want to pray, I want to pray right now, but maybe like you were walking by an animal or something like that, or a person, and some urine got on your clothing. So you go and make a nice wudu and you get ready to pray. What's the problem? Is that you have a najasa on your clothing still. You cannot make a very good wudu and your salah would still be valid if you have najasa on your clothing. So therefore, what do you have to do besides wudu? You have to wash your clothing. So that's called washing the najas, or washing the najasa. And then, like we said, removing the hadath. Hadath is something which is intangible, which is basically the state of a person when they are not in wudu. You cannot see it. There's nothing like you can feel or touch. For example, a person has wudu, and then they use the bathroom. Then after they use the bathroom, they don't have wudu, obviously, correct, right? So is there any difference if you look at this person before they use the bathroom and after they use the bathroom? They look exactly the same. You cannot tell outwardly that this person does not have wudu by looking at them. So that's something spiritual, like it's something that you cannot tell just by look or see or touch or taste that this person does not have wudu. But going back to what we said, that water, the pure water, it can be used for both of these things. For removing the spiritual impurity, which is hadath, which is that you are, I don't know if spiritual impurity is the best term for it, but the impurity of not being upon wudu. This also doesn't mean that a Muslim is impure. It doesn't mean you're impure if you're not in a state of wudu, or even if you are in a state of janaba, like you need to make ghusl. You're never impure as a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ لَا يَنْجُسْ, that the Muslim, the believer, never becomes impure. It just means that you're not ready to pray the prayer at that time. So one thing is to make wudu, or to make ghusl, you need this pure water. What did we call that water again? What was that water that we need to make wudu? Tahur, yes, the pure water, tahur or tahur. And we also need it to remove any impurity. If there was a urine or something that got on our clothing or on our body or on the ground, all of these things, they need to be removed first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. Allah says in the Quran, we sent down water that is pure from the sky. So the rainwater is pure. The rivers are pure. Lakes are pure. What about an ocean? Is the ocean water tahur? Yes. Even though somebody might say, well, I go to the ocean and it smells like fish, and it smells like it's very salty, for example, and there's seaweed in it and stuff like that. It's still tahur? Yes, even with all of those things. And the person asked the Prophet ﷺ, one day he said, Ya Rasulullah, we go and we travel in the ocean. He was like a fisherman. So he said, we travel in the ocean. Can we make wudu from the water of the ocean? So the Prophet ﷺ said, هُوَ الطَّهُورُ مَاؤُهُ الْحِلُّ مَيْتَتُهُ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the ocean water is pure, and the dead carrion of the ocean is halal, like it's permissible. So if a cow was to die natural death, it would not be permissible to eat this cow. But if a fish was to eat if a fish was to die a natural death, for example, then this would be permissible to eat. And usually when you take the fish out of water for fishing, and then it will die. You don't have to slice the throat of the fish. It just dies. So this is permissible. The Prophet ﷺ gave him extra information like that benefited him. So this is the first thing to know, is that the general case, all the water we see in the nature, in the sky, the rain that comes down, this is all pure water that obviously we could use for wudu. We have to use this for making wudu, as we said. There's a number of evidences, but I'll try to keep this class very very simple and basic. So there's a lot of evidences that we have to use water for making wudu. What about, do we have to use water for removing najasa? Does everyone agree that we have to use water for removing najasa? Okay, so what if, let me make that question more problematic for you. Somebody got something, like we said, let's use the example of urine again. There's some things that are other than urine that are najis also, but we'll talk about them later. So somebody had urine on a clothing, and they took that clothing and they hung it up outside on a clothing line. And the weather is so hot, like 100-degree days, and the sun is shining and beating. So you leave that clothes outside on the clothesline for 2 or 3 days, and you go outside, and it looks perfectly clean. and you don't see any part of that urine. You don't see it, you don't smell it, it's not visible at all or tangible at all. So did that thawb become pure because it was being beat by the sun for 3 days or 4 days? Some people might say yeah. So some say yes, but the example or the answer we'll give for this class, which is the majority, is that no, it needs to be washed with water. Again, there's a difference of opinion. Almost everything we say, there's some difference of opinion around it. So that's just to keep in mind. But the answer we'll give is that no, everything should be washed. Every najasa should be washed, even if, for example, it could be just have gone away by itself, just in the sun, for example. Or, for example, somebody has a knife and somebody cut like pepperoni with that knife. The pork is najis, right? Pork is najis. It's not just haram to eat, it's also impure. So if somebody cut the pepperoni with a knife and then they just wipe the knife with a paper towel very thoroughly, so it's brand new and shiny again, but he didn't use water. What would that mean, according to what we're saying? It's still not pure. It's still not pure. You would have to run it under water for it to become purified. You would have to run it under water for it to be purified. And again, all of these things, there's some difference of opinion, so some madhabs would allow that. Yes?
So you said that pig's also impure. So if you were to get, let's say, like pig fat like on your clothes, would you have to wash that also before prayer?
Yes, you would have to wash it off, but we'll have a whole topic of discussion on that, inshallah. So everything's coming in logical order, inshallah, of like how to wash these things and how many times do you have to wash them and so on, inshallah. So this water is pure. The general rule is that that water will remain pure, but what if we have a problem? What if we know that some najasa got in the water itself? We're talking about now how to wash our clothing or wash our bodies from najasa. What if the problem happened to the water? For example, you have some water outside, and somebody went and urinated in that water. Now, is that water going to be tahir or najis, or tahur or najis? Okay, somebody said, is it standing or running? Somebody said, it depends.
It depends on color, taste, and smell.
It depends on the color, or the taste, or the smell, if it changed. So it depends on the quantity of water. All of these are questions, yeah. So you can't give a yes or no answer to this question. Because what if that water that we said is in the backyard and somebody urinated in, what if it's a huge pond that's like, hundreds of feet? Of course not. If somebody urinates in it, the whole pond is going to be pure. It's the one person putting najasa in it is not going to ruin all of the water. Except in certain circumstances, even then. But I'll talk about that in a moment. So basically, to summarize, the scholars, they say, if it's a small amount of water, and it gets najasa in it, it will become impure. All of the water will become impure. And if it's a large amount of water, it will not become impure. But even then, there's an exception. What is a small amount of water? The Prophet ﷺ, he has the famous hadith where he said, إِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْن لَمْ يَحْمِلِ الْخَبَثِ. That once water reaches al-qullatayn, a measurement, it will not carry any impurity. It will not carry any impurity. So if a water is less than that measurement that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, qullatayn, 2 qulla, and the scholars, they give this measurement as about, in our day and age, about 191 liters. 191 liters. What is that similar to? It's similar to a lot of barrels. A lot of barrels are about 200 liters. Like a barrel like this could be about 200 liters. So we could say similar to like the size of a barrel, the amount of water in a barrel. Or we could say maybe like a bathtub or like a kid's pool, something like that, close to that. The Prophet ﷺ said this amount of water, if it will not become impure. So if a drop of urine got on that large amount of water, like for example, it's like that larger than that barrel, or like kind of a larger pool, for example, somebody has in their backyard, and somebody urinates in the pool, one of the kids is in the pool and they urinate, this would not make the water najis, because the Prophet ﷺ said it's a large amount. And if it's smaller than that, then all of the water will become najis. All of the water will become najis. You could not use it for wudu, or you could not use it for washing najasa, because the water itself is impure now. Now the water is the problem. And we said there's one exception to that, which is even if the water is a large amount, it could still become impure. Even if the water is a large amount, it could still become impure. What's an example of that? Does anyone know? If you smell it. Yes, correct. Yeah, if you smell it, or see it, or you could taste it. For example, there's some very large rivers in the world, but they're being pumped with sewage, right? So in that sewage water, which is pumped into a very large river, they polluted it. So therefore, even if it's a huge amount of water, but you could smell the najasa in it, that water is still considered to be impure. And the opposite is true. That if it's a small amount of water, it's impure if najasa comes in it, even if you cannot smell it, or not taste it, or not see it. So if there's like a small bucket of water, for example, that's below the measurement we said, qullatayn, a bucket, for example, and then it got some urine, a drop or two of urine. What we said earlier is that even if you cannot smell, or not taste, or not see the najasa, that water has still become najis. It's still impure, just because of the fact that it's a small amount of water. How do you fix that problem? What's the solution to this? Anyone know? Like, okay, I don't want to throw this water away, I don't want to waste it. So what's the solution? Add more water, yeah. So if you put it in like a bigger container, and you add enough water, that the water becomes above qullatayn, like we said, about 190 liters, then in this case it would be purified. So this is the water which is tahur, which purifies. Before we talk more about the water which is impure, we have something else too, which is kind of like a middle ground. Water which is not, you cannot make wudu with it. It's also not najis, it's not impure water, but there's like a middle ground. What would that middle ground be? Could anyone tell me? Used water. Okay, but the used water is true, but I'll leave it out of today's class because of we're trying to make it maybe very simple. So there is used water. What he means by used water, since he brought it up, is like, for example, if somebody was making wudu and under them was a pan, and they're making wudu, and the water which is flowing off of their limbs when they're making wudu is being collected in that pan. And they wash their face and the water goes into that pan and stuff. So the scholars, they say that water which was collected in the pan from this person washing his limbs in wudu, it is not impure, it's pure water. It's not tahur though, it's not enough, you could not make wudu from it. Why? Because they said it was used in ibadah, it was used already, like that water was used already. And since we said like we want to keep this class, not too complicated, so that's a very rare situation that this would happen.
If somebody has a swimming pool,
yes?
swim on it.
If somebody has a swimming pool and that would be the middle ground, the category of water. That's actually could be kind of a correct opinion. But we're trying to look for something. It's not perfectly good that you could use it for wudu. It's not najas either. It's not impure. Somewhere in the middle. Snow is pure. Snow is pure. Something else. So what if, for example, if water is like re-purified? Okay, maybe. But that's not what we're looking for, but that could be in some circumstances. If water was like re-purified after being in the sewage or something like that. But that's a different, I'll give you all the answer. It is what they call the middle category is tahir. Tahir is pure, it's good to use, but it's not purifying. Or it's perfectly fine to use. What an example of that would be, the scholars, they all agree that this kind of water is not permissible in the case of, for example, something being cooked. Right? You have a lot of water, a big pot of water, and then you put some meat in the water, and you cook it for a while. This water is perfectly pure, right? It's not impure. But are you allowed to make wudu from this? No. By the agreement of all of the scholars, you cannot make wudu from that water. Why? Because what do you call that water at this point? Broth or stew. or soup. So the scholars, basically what you're saying is correct. If you don't call it water anymore, it is not suitable to make wudu. If you don't call it just water. Like if you added another word to the word water, then it's not permissible to use it for wudu anymore. So if you say soup water or like broth water, or for example you have some water and you add rose water, you know, the rose scent for example, if you add a lot of that, would you still call this water? You would say it's rose water, right? If you took like a little bit of water and then you added a bunch of soda to it and it kind of mixed together, the water and the soda, what would you call this? You would call it water which is mixed with soda, for example. So anytime it's not called water anymore, it's called like water or something else, at this point it's not suitable for wudu. So you could not make wudu, for example, with juice, even though that juice might be a lot of water. You could not make wudu with, like we said, like rose water. You could not make wudu with something which was cooked. For example, it became like stew or something like that, even though it's 90% water. But because of the fact that you cooked something in it and it's taken the name water was taken away from it, at this point we will not use it anymore for making wudu or for washing impurities.
Then, sorry, how about the container? If the container is gold made or it is contained on a sack which is not halal, like pork, leather kind of thing, that
Yeah.
water is also not.
So yeah, again, that's something we left out, but he asked the question, he said, what if the container is impure or it's gold or something like that? So if the container is impure, that means that what's in the water will become impure too, right? Like you have a bucket or a tub or something and it has najasa in it already. So you add water into it, as long as it remains a small amount of water, it became najis because of the najis container. The container was impure, therefore the water became impure. But he said, what about like gold, for example? So yes, many of the scholars, or some of the scholars we should say, they say the Prophet ﷺ forbade aniyatul dhahabi wal fidda. He forbade drinking from vessels of gold and silver. And the scholars, they say the reason for that is because it's like excessive luxury. Excessive luxury for somebody to have gold or silver as cups and plates and things like that. If you have gold or silver cups or plates in your house, you shouldn't have it. You should get rid of it. Because this is not something permissible. It's like, it's going beyond the boundaries in luxury. They said, كَسْرُ قُلُوبِ الْفُقَرَاءِ. It makes the poor people feel very bad. That, some people don't have food to eat, and some people are eating literally off of gold and silver. So therefore it's haram. Prophet ﷺ said it's haram. So if we put something in a haram vessel, for example, they had a cup of gold, they said also it would not be permissible to make wudu from it, for example. Even though the water is pure, but because you went against the order of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes? I think it's a rare scenario, right? We don't have gold. Yes?
So, I mean, nowadays they have a lot of, like the coffee in Dubai and stuff, like they have this coffee gold inside, like, gold plated. Gold plated, no, I mean,
Gold foil inside of food.
yeah, they made it basically. Is that halal because of gold? I don't know.
Wallahu alam, he's saying like some food even, they put gold foil on top of it. And it's mixed in with the food and things like that. It seems to me that this is similar to the reasoning why the scholars said it's haram. They said it's haram because it's excessive luxury which would make the poor feel bad. Again, the poor people don't have food at all. So some people are eating out of gold. So same thing, it seems like the same thing, wallahu alam, that if you say there's gold inside of a chocolate bar, gold foil, and things like this, it's also being excessive, and it seems to be the same reasoning. So it's definitely very doubtful that this thing is halal. It's more likely to be haram. Yes? Yes, yeah. Wudu, we have a whole topic class for it. So we'll cover wudu maybe next week. Inshallah, for wudu. We'll have a whole subject about wudu and a whole subject about ghusl. Yeah.
I heard that gold and silver utensils are also forbidden on this dunya because it's reserved for the akhirah, right?
Yes, that's the hadith. Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever eats from the gold and silver vessels, they will not use it in the next life. So these are the next life in Jannah that people have gold and silver. So if they have it in this life, they will have it in the next.
Majority of the sweets what we have in India or Pakistan, they have silver foil on it.
They have a what kind of foil?
Silver.
Silver foil. It's real silver?
Yes, yes.
Real silver? Again, this is just something that I was asked in the class, but if we go and ask the scholars, if they decide on this matter, Allah alam. I don't have like the conclusive answer right now, but I can try to look into it further, inshallah. The next matter, and maybe we'll finish with this, inshallah. This is a very, very important principle. The scholars, they say, whoever doubts the purity of water, or whether it's pure or najis, what is the basis? The basis is that it's pure or that it's najis.
Doubt will not nullify the purity.
Very good, yes. The doubt will not nullify the purity. They say, in Arabic, they have a principle, qaida. Not al-qaida is something different, but qaida is like a principle, which means al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. That, like he said, the certainty doesn't go away because of doubt. So if, for example, if you're walking on a street, and maybe this doesn't happen in America so much, but maybe in back home, like somebody's cleaning their balcony and then they throw water off the balcony, right? And then you get a bunch of water on you. So what do you do at this point? Do you say, this water could have been impure? Or it could be pure, it could be impure, so therefore I'm going to assume it's not pure? Or do you assume that it's pure? Knock on the door and find out, right? No. So actually, this exact scenario happened with Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Exact scenario. So he was walking, and then somebody threw some water from the house, and it got on him, Umar, and the person next to him. So the person next to him, he yelled up and he said, what was that water you just threw out? Was it pure or was it pure or impure? So Umar radiyallahu anhu, what do you think he said? He said, oh, the person who threw the water, Ya sahib al-mizab, don't answer him. Don't even answer him. Why? Because you don't even need to ask the question. The question is wrong. You just assume that this person was throwing away some water or something like that, and that it's pure. So therefore, any water we encounter in this world, if we're not sure 100% that it's impure, you just ignore it, and you assume that it's pure. If you're traveling and you come across a creek, you assume it's pure. If you're walking in the street and you walk in a puddle and the puddle splashes back on you, you assume that it's pure. If a car drives by and some of the water from the street splashes on you, you assume that it's pure. This makes our life so much easier. This makes our life very easy. Same thing with almost everything. You assume that everything is pure. If you go to a park, people bring their dogs to the park and stuff, right? So if you go to a park, can I pray at the park? Because the dogs might have come and they might have made this part of the park impure, right? But is it allowed for me to just pray in the park without any sajada, without anything, just pray in the grass? Yes, it's permissible. Why? Because it's possible that the dogs came and maybe urinated here or something like that, but you don't know that. So therefore you assume that this place is pure. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا, that the whole world was made for me a place of prayer and a purification, because you can use the ground for the dirt for tayammum, which we'll talk about in the future, inshallah. This is a very easy rule that makes our life so much easier. Some people, they have problems, they think way too much into things, and they think everything is impure and stuff like that. Actually, the scholars, they said the ruling is everything is pure. Also, we have a number of evidences, particularly for this matter, like the hadith, for example, that the dogs used to urinate and then they would go in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, you have to understand that some people had like a problem with this hadith because they don't understand it. They're like, wait, the dogs urinated in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ? No, the wording of the hadith is that dogs would urinate, comma, like that's the beginning part of the sentence, and then they would, وَكَانَتْ الْكِلَابُ تَبُولُ ثُمَّ تُقْبِلُ وَتُدْبِرُ فِي مَسْجِدِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. And then the dogs would go in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, they don't allow dogs in the masjid, but this is like 1,000 years ago, and the masjid was very simple, very primitive. So maybe there wasn't even a lot of doors and things like that. So any animal that could go in the masjid might go in the masjid and walk through. A dog might walk through the masjid, or an animal might walk through the masjid. This is a very simple building without a lot of doors and things like that. So the hadith is saying that dogs would urinate. Of course, they're an animal, right? And then they might walk through the masjid after that. But we don't assume, the Prophet ﷺ didn't say like, okay, you have to water the masjid, purify the masjid before every prayer. Rather, they would just assume that, maybe this happened, but it wouldn't have happened in this part of the masjid. So therefore, the assumption, which makes our life very easy, and it's part of the ease of Islam, is that everything is pure in terms of the ground, the water, things like this, our clothes. All of this is pure unless we have evidence otherwise, unless we are certain otherwise. Same thing with our clothing, right? If I find if you find clothes in your house, you find pants or a shirt, and you don't remember wearing it or anything like that, so the assumption is that it's pure. You don't say, okay, maybe it has najasa on it, so I should wash it again before I wear it. No, you assume that, okay, this clothing is pure, it must be pure. That's the basic assumption. The scholars, they even go so far, as to remove doubts from people to show how easy it is. They said even the clothing of non-Muslims, this wouldn't happen very much, but the clothing of non-Muslims, you don't have to wash it before wearing it. Even they said like things which are personal, like their pants, for example, or again, it's not very hygienic that you would wear somebody's clothes right after them. But they said even this is permissible. Like for example, you went to like the Goodwill or stores where they sell used clothes, right? So a lot of people would say, okay, they're kuffar, they're not Muslims, they don't clean themselves after the bathroom and things like that, so I should definitely wash the clothes before I wear it. Yes, hygienically, sure, you should wash it. But in terms of like, is it halal or haram? They say the assumption is that this clothing is pure. Even if it's from a non-Muslim, and many times they don't, might let urine get on their clothes and things like that. But as Muslims, our religion is so easy that these things, we don't have to wash them or assume that it's impure. Rather, the assumption is that it's pure. Yes, inshallah, we'll end here and we'll take some questions, inshallah. Yes, tafadhal. No, we're done. Go ahead.
So, like you said, if my clothes has some urine dried up in the sun, it's not clean. But I heard somewhere it's a dry ground, clay ground, and some dog or a human urinate, when it's went through the sun cycle, dried up, which become clean.
Yes, yeah. This is the second opinion. Like we said, we don't mention all of the opinions in this class, but there's another opinion, is that if the najasa is removed completely by the sun or the wind or something like that, that it becomes pure. This is another opinion. Yes.
So like you say for big swimming pools, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if it's najasa over there, big najasa.
Yeah. So if there's a swimming pool, a community swimming pool, lots of people swim in it, and some people might urinate in the pool, right? Some kids might urinate in the pool. It would still be considered all pure. The swimming pool, you don't have to, you consider that the water is all pure.
My question was, say, if we go to filter and chlorine stuff, chemical.
Yes. Yeah, so inshallah, even if there's chlorine in the pool and you can smell the chlorine and stuff like that, inshallah, this doesn't take the water away from the fact that it's pure. So in a swimming pool, you might say, okay, it's pool water, it has the smell of chlorine and stuff like that. Some scholars might say, okay, to be on the safe side, it's like changed because of its smell. But inshallah, the easier opinion is that it's fine to use. Even if you wanted to make wudu from this water, the pool water, which has the smell of chlorine, it would be permissible, inshallah. Allah. You can do wudu with it, yeah. With pool water that smells like chlorine, that's fine, inshallah. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
From an Islamic standpoint, men is considered tahir, which is why it's, if it gets on your clothes and it's dry, you can rub it off.
Yes, but we'll talk about all the things which are impure or like disputed if they're impure next time, inshallah. Yeah, but that's one of them. Yeah. طيب. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah, we'll see everyone next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Barakallahu feekum.
I had to go back to my Arabic. I was like, what is this?